The static came first, then the voice. To anyone still out there. This is Safe Zone Echo. We're alive. Repeat, we're alive. Coordinates encoded. Trust no one. Silence is survival. The message looped once more before the radio hissed back into a dead hum. Commander Mara Elston leaned over the rusted console, eyes narrowed at the waveform monitor. Her calloused fingers tapped the panel like she was coaxing secrets from a dying friend. "Where the hell did that come from?" whispered Jace, the young scout barely old enough to remember a time before the world ended. "Not sure," Mara murmured. "But we're going to find out." Outside, the city once called Providence had become nothing but a shattered husk, cracked buildings, tangled metal, nature creeping back through every exposed seam. Zombies roamed in slow, soulless packs. Infected but not mindless, they moved with a chilling coordination at times, especially near the center, near what survivors called the Deadest Zone. For 5 years, nobody had returned from that place. Mara turned to her small team inside the reinforced underground hub known only as Outpost 7. They were survivors, not heroes, mechanics, medics, former soldiers, farmers, and misfits. But now, a mystery had pierced the silence they'd built their lives around. "We've all heard the stories," Mara said, standing in the flickering emergency light. "That beyond the inner collapse zone, there's nothing left. Just death. But that broadcast, someone's out there. Someone's alive, and they've figured out something we haven't." Silence followed her words. Not the kind born of fear, but of decision. These people had survived too much, lost too many, to jump at ghost signals. Yet Mara's leadership had kept them breathing through impossible winters, famine, and 2 zombie siege waves. Carmen, the group's tech specialist, finally broke the silence. "I've triangulated part of the signal. It's old tech, analog frequency bounce. Could be coming from the northwest quadrant, sector Zeta 12. "Zeta 12, growled Tobias, the gruff ex-miner. "That's right along the fire line. No man's land. Last team we sent there vanished." Mara nodded. "That's why we'll take a different approach." At dawn, the team set out, cloaked in mist and silence. Mara led, followed by Carmen, Jace, and Tobias. They moved through forgotten subway tunnels and shattered overpasses, weaving through skeletons of collapsed civilization. Every creak of metal or flutter of birds set nerves on edge. Above them, the dead zone loomed, mile after mile of abandoned homes, rusting cars, broken highways. It was a graveyard where time stood still. But as they neared Zeta 12, something strange happened. The air grew cleaner. Fewer infected tracks, less decay. The buildings, while still broken, showed signs of repair. Handmade signs marked safe paths, coded messages in symbols only survivors could recognize. They paused at an overturned delivery truck. On the side, smeared in ash but visible under Carmen's UV light, were the words. "Hold the line. You are not alone." This isn't random," Jace said, eyes wide. "Someone's maintaining this route." A distant growl echoed down the broken boulevard. "Move," Mara hissed. They ducked into a pharmacy, half-collapsed but sturdy enough. Through the shattered display windows, they watched 3 zombies, gaunt, leathery, and fast, move past like hunting dogs. "These aren't drifters," Tobias said under his breath. "They're scouts." "Zeta 12's different," Mara whispered, scanning the rooftops. "We're not just dealing with infected. We're walking into a territory, someone's territory." When the path cleared, Carmen quickly connected her handheld scanner to a nearby communications pole. Her device blinked with static before stabilizing. "I've got it," she gasped. "Signal strength is stronger here. It's being relayed. Someone built a network." They followed the signal deeper into the sector. That's when they saw it, a rooftop garden blooming with vegetables, solar panels lining the buildings, and strange figures patrolling above with makeshift crossbows. It was a full block of fortified structures, covered in metal scrap and surrounded by sharpened barriers. From one window, a curious child's face peeked out, then vanished. "It's real," Jace breathed. "A hidden community. They've been here this whole time." Before they could step closer, a voice boomed from a nearby speaker. "Stay where you are. Weapons down. Identify yourselves." Mara raised her hands slowly, motioning for her team to do the same. "We're not infected. We picked up your signal. We want to talk." A pause followed. Then, gates shifted open with a creaking moan. A woman emerged, older, scarred, but strong. She wore a patch that read, "Haven Sector 9. You survived the world's deadliest zone just to find us?" she asked. Mara nodded. "No, we survived it because we believe in something better." The woman studied her for a moment. "Then welcome to Haven. Let's see if you can handle the truth." Inside the walls of Haven, the world felt different. It wasn't just the sunlight hitting the rooftop gardens or the soft murmur of children laughing in the distance, it was the feeling that time had rewound, if only slightly. Life hadn't just continued here, it had evolved, quietly and stubbornly, in defiance of the death all around it. Mara stepped cautiously through the gate, her team behind her. Carmen whispered under her breath, "They have electricity. Solar grids intact. And, look at that, water filtration running off rooftop collection." "Smart," Tobias said gruffly. "But something still feels off." The woman who'd greeted them earlier stood at the center of a watchtower platform, waiting. Her name, she told them, was Leora, and she was Haven's elected leader, though elected was a loose term these days. Leadership here wasn't about popularity. It was about survival. She led them past terraced walkways where planters grew lettuce and kale, past storage bins filled with rain-harvested water, and into a multi-story office building converted into a makeshift command center. "We don't usually allow outsiders," Leora said plainly, leading them into a room marked with old maps, scribbled notes, and hand-drawn schematics. "But your signal response, well, it's been a long time since anyone brave, or foolish, tried to contact us." Mara replied, "We thought we were alone out there." "You were. Most of the other settlements didn't make it past year 2, Leora said, walking over to a massive table covered in handwritten logs. "We barely made it ourselves." She picked up a logbook, flipping through pages until she found what she wanted. "When the world collapsed, we didn't run, we sealed off the block and turned inward. We had engineers, former military, a few good minds, and 100 people who weren't ready to die. That number's now 62. Jace looked around, wide-eyed. "But the infected, they're everywhere out there. Why haven't they found you?" "They have," Leora said, with a grim smile. "We learned to redirect them. Sounds, lights, false trails. We studied their movements, built lures and decoys. Every now and then, one breaches, and we lose someone. But this place, it works because of the rules." Mara folded her arms. "Rules?" Leora nodded. "Strict ones. Break them, and you put everyone at risk." She walked to a chalkboard listing the top 5. "No outside transmissions. Ever. No lone patrols beyond the perimeter. All new arrivals are quarantined for 5 days. Weapons must remain in designated lockers. The truth stays here." Tobias squinted at the last one. "The truth?" Leora's jaw tightened. "Everyone thinks the collapse was about the infected. But that's only half the story." Before anyone could ask more, an alert buzzed over a nearby speaker. Leora stepped aside to answer a radio call. The voice crackled through, "West Tower, motion detected near the barrier. Might be a stray. Test it, she responded. Use low sound and UV flare. Don't engage unless it's inside the line. Mara turned to Carmen, who was already examining the building's communications hub. They've got a functioning network, Carmen said softly. Analog base, but stable. They've been upgrading piece by piece. This place is a miracle. And miracles don't come without cost, Mara murmured. As the quarantine rule required, the team was led to a converted floor in the adjacent building, safe, clean, but isolated. Meals were delivered through a secure slot. No contact, no conversation. Only observation. On night 2, Mara found a message scratched lightly under the bunk frame. If you're reading this, they haven't told you the truth yet. Be careful. Her instincts bristled. On night 4, Jace reported seeing a man outside their room being escorted by 2 guards, his hands bound, mouth gagged. They didn't see me, he said, eyes wide. He was struggling. I think he was one of them. A resident. When Leora returned on the final day of quarantine, Mara asked calmly, what happens to people who break the rules here? Leora's face didn't flinch. They're removed. How? Leora looked her straight in the eye. Removed. There was no smile this time. As the team was finally cleared and allowed to walk freely, Mara pulled Carmen aside. Start documenting everything. Quietly. We need to know what this place is hiding. From a nearby rooftop, a guard watched them closely. Below, laughter from the children echoed in the street. The sun shone through the cracks in the clouds, casting a warm glow over the seemingly peaceful haven. But behind every corner, in every shadow, Mara could feel it. This place had secrets. And in a city where the infected ruled the outside, something far more human was controlling the inside. Mara's boots echoed against the tiled floor of Haven's old municipal building, now repurposed as the central operations hub. On the surface, Haven appeared to be a model of post-collapse survival: clean water, organized patrols, controlled energy usage, and even schooling for children. But Mara had seen too much in the outside world to accept anything at face value. It was day 6 in Haven, and already the cracks were showing. Carmen had slipped away during the pre-dawn hours, claiming she was mapping the communication nodes. In reality, she was trying to trace the internal signal routes Leora had so carefully kept hidden. Jace, meanwhile, spent time talking to the teenagers, naive enough to speak freely, yet old enough to know what shouldn't be said aloud. That evening, during a staged town meeting, Leora stood beneath a string of solar lanterns, smiling as residents gathered in neat rows. Her words were filled with hope, but her eyes scanned the crowd like a hawk looking for weakness. We survive because we obey, she said, her voice calm and confident. We live because we protect each other from not just the infected, but from ignorance, mistakes, and secrets. Outside these walls, there's chaos. Inside, there's order. Everyone clapped. Everyone except Mara. That night, in the privacy of their assigned quarters, the team compared notes. Carmen leaned over a rough sketch of the central compound. They're running internal surveillance, she said. Not just on us, on everyone. Thermal scans, sound sensors, hidden mics. I piggybacked one of their camera feeds. Guess what I found? She tapped her screen. A grainy video appeared, timestamped from 2 nights earlier. It showed a man in his mid-40s, calm, composed, being dragged by 2 guards through a hidden stairwell. He wasn't struggling. He was crying. They called him Dr. Rourke in the logs, Carmen said. He was one of their original medics. Apparently, he questioned the leadership. What happened to him? Jace asked. I checked the population logs. His name's gone. Like he never existed. Mara's expression hardened. We're not just dealing with a strict community. We're dealing with a controlled system. They're rewriting their history. Tobias, who had mostly kept to himself, finally spoke. I talked to one of the old builders, guy named Levin. He said Leora used to have a council. 5 people who made decisions together. But after the 3rd year, all 4 others either disappeared or were removed. Now, it's just her. Mara stood. Tomorrow, we split up. Carmen, find the lower-level network room, trace the surveillance power lines. Jace, go with the maintenance crew. Watch the guard shifts, see if anything strange pops up. Tobias, you're with me. We're going to visit the storage tunnels. Why there? Tobias asked. Because that's where the air smells wrong. The next day, Mara and Tobias followed a group hauling water barrels toward the lower tunnels. The deeper they went, the less maintained things looked, walls stained with old smoke, doors dented and rusted. At a bend in the corridor, Mara slowed her pace. There, behind a partially collapsed panel, was a sealed door. It looked like it hadn't been opened in months. No markings. No handle. Tobias pressed his ear to it. Nothing. Mara noticed something else, a faint trail of boot prints in the dust, leading away from the door. We're being watched, she said. They turned and walked casually back toward the main corridor, but both of them could feel it, eyes tracking them from the shadows. Meanwhile, Carmen was under the building, slipping past silent halls filled with old data servers and cracked monitors. Behind a false panel, she found what she was looking for, Haven's live archive system. Screens displayed feed after feed, rooms, hallways, rooftops. Even the children's classroom. She accessed a log folder labeled, Compliance Events. She clicked one. Footage appeared. It showed the same man, Dr. Rourke, speaking to a small group in hushed voices. He handed someone a notebook. The video cut forward. The next frame showed him on his knees in the dark. A voice said, "Truth is a threat." Then the feed ended. She copied the files onto her drive and backed away slowly. Her heart thudded as an alarm light blinked red once, then stopped. Had she triggered something? By the time they regrouped that night, it was clear, Haven was a sanctuary built on silence. Dissent wasn't debated. It was erased. We have to decide, Mara said. Stay and quietly resist, or get the evidence out to the other zones. Prove this place isn't what it claims. Jace spoke up, his voice shaking. They offered me a job today. Guard detail. And? Tobias asked. They want me to report on you. Everyone went quiet. Outside the room, the hallway light flickered once, then steadied. Inside, their trust was now the only shield they had. And in Haven, even trust could get you disappeared. They met beneath the generator hall. The humming of the solar converters above gave them cover. It was the one place in Haven where the surveillance cameras didn't reach, either because no one thought to place them there or because even Leora's regime didn't trust a machine that often failed during storms. Carmen, Mara, Jace, and Tobias gathered around a broken vent shaft glowing faintly with battery light. Carmen's small screen displayed the archived footage, proof of Dr. Rourke's removal. The video played in silence, but the message was loud, dissent equaled disappearance. We have to get this out, Jace whispered, his voice shaking. If the other outposts knew, if people outside knew what Haven really is, they'd collapse it from the outside, Tobias said bluntly. Or worse. Try to take it over. Mara nodded grimly. And innocent people here would suffer. Leora's built a trap disguised as salvation. The question is, how do we dismantle it without setting off every alarm? It was Carmen who answered. The Whisper Network. Mara's brow lifted. That an actual thing, or just one of your conspiracy theories? Carmen smiled faintly. Both. I started noticing patterns, certain people who took longer routes, stayed behind after curfew, or ask the right questions but never openly. They're careful, but they exist. And I think they want what we want. Proof? Tobias asked. Carmen reached into her pocket and held up a folded piece of cloth. Inside was a small pin, handmade, a red thread woven into the shape of an ear. I found this tucked in the lining of my borrowed coat. Same symbol I saw etched near the power room panel. Mara took it, inspecting the tiny detail. They're listening too. Watching. I think they've been waiting for someone to push first, Carmen said. We just became that push. Later that night, Jace received another quiet invitation to join the night patrol. He accepted, this time wearing a smile he didn't feel. They gave him a flashlight, a makeshift spear, and a map of blind zones to monitor. But as he walked the far corridor near the rooftop water catchments, a figure stepped from the shadows. Hooded, quick, calm. You're not like the others, she said softly. Jace tensed. Excuse me? You're asking questions. That's dangerous here. So either you're stupid, or you're trying to fix something. The figure removed her hood, a young woman, maybe 20, with sharp eyes and a scar that crossed her brow. My name's Imani, she said. And if you're serious, I can show you something. They moved fast and quiet, cutting through the back gardens and dropping through a hidden hatch behind the compost room. Below, under layers of metal and earth, was a small room filled with old terminals, wires, and stacks of books. And people. Maybe 8 or 10. All seated. All alert. This, Imani whispered, is what Haven doesn't want you to see. They called themselves the Whisper Network. Survivors of truth, information hoarders, quiet rebels. An older man named Kellen leaned forward, speaking softly. We used to be part of the council. Back when votes mattered. Back when Leora led with others. But after the 6th winter, she changed. Fear makes leaders selfish. He pointed to a locked metal crate. That holds files, real ones. Medical reports, incident records, names of people who never moved sectors but were simply taken. We've been documenting everything, Imani added. But we've never had a way to get the information out. Anyone caught with this gets erased. Now you show up. Outsiders. Skilled. Connected. Jay stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, why haven't you exposed her yourselves? Imani looked down. Because we're not fighters. We're watchers. And if we move too soon, it'll all burn. Jace reached into his jacket and pulled out Carmen's footage drive. Then maybe it's time we light the right flame. The next morning, Mara stood before Leora in the Watchtower's command room. The sun was just rising behind the ruins beyond the zone walls. Smoke from the outer barrier drifted like fog. I'd like to request a supply run to the northwest ridge, Mara said casually. Leora didn't look up from her notes. Why? To collect solar panel salvage. Your grid's wearing thin, and Carmen mapped high-yield scrap sites. Leora's eyes flicked up. You've been busy. We're survivors, Mara replied evenly. Staying useful is how we stay alive. Leora smiled, small, knowing. Permission granted. But I'm assigning 2 of my own guards. Just to make sure you don't get lost. Mara nodded, already expecting the leash. Understood. As she left, she passed one of Haven's children, maybe 10 years old, carrying a basket of dried herbs. The boy paused and glanced up at her with wary eyes. Then, quietly, he handed her a folded piece of paper and kept walking. Mara opened it later. It read. They're watching the east wall. West Pipe Gate is unguarded from midnight to 4 a.m. Use it. Beneath the message was a small red ear. The Whisper Network wasn't just hiding anymore. They were ready to act. The storm rolled in just before dusk. Rain tapped against the rooftops of Haven, muffling sounds, casting shadows, and cloaking footsteps. It was the kind of weather that made the guards stay closer to the fires and the cameras flicker in and out. For Mara, it was exactly what they needed. In the command room, Leora watched the storm with narrowed eyes. She didn't trust the weather. Not when things had gone so quiet. 2 guards returned from the salvage trip with Mara's team. They reported nothing unusual. No signs of escape, no suspicious movements. Just salvaged metal sheets, broken panel wiring, and 5 empty battery casings. All according to plan. What they didn't know was that Carmen had found a buried comms node near the ridge, still linked to the old government's emergency broadcast system. And now, with enough solar charge, they had a chance to use it. But first, they needed to leave Haven. Not as prisoners. As ghosts. West Pipe Gate. Midnight to 4 a.m., Mara repeated under her breath, staring at the crude map the Whisper network had drawn for her. That's our opening. They met in a locked maintenance crawlspace behind the agricultural greenhouse, Mara, Carmen, Jace, Tobias, and Imani from the Whisper network. The rest of the Whisperers stayed behind to continue the mission inside Haven. Once we're gone, Mara said, Leora will know someone helped us. You sure your people are ready for that? Kellen, the elder of the Whisper network, nodded. We'll vanish if we have to. Truth is worth the risk. Carmen sealed the files in a weatherproof bag and tucked them into her gear. I've encrypted everything. The footage, the incident logs, the names. If we can reach the relay tower, I can broadcast a signal and bounce it to Outpost 9, even further if the system's still active. Jace tightened his boots, glancing toward the greenhouse's shuttered exit. And what if we can't? Then we carry it ourselves, Mara said. Tobias grunted, tightening the strap of his pack. Been carrying heavier burdens for years. At exactly midnight, they made their move. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking the earth and turning Haven's stone paths into slippery trails. Guards huddled under makeshift tents near the towers. The western perimeter, largely considered too overgrown to be useful, had no one stationed directly at the old pipe tunnel. Imani led the way, crouching low beside a wall of ivy. She lifted a section of rusted fencing and pushed through to a drainage canal. From there, they crawled into a narrow shaft barely wide enough for one person at a time. This used to drain water from the north tanks, she whispered. Collapsed years ago. Only rats come through now. Rats and rebels, Jace muttered. They emerged into the darkness of Haven's outer zone, just beyond the safety perimeter. The real world, wild, undead, unpredictable, spread before them like a sleeping beast. The forest pressed close on all sides. Blackened trees bent with the weight of water, and the wind carried distant, guttural echoes. Mara raised a fist. Hold. Through the curtain of rain, glowing eyes shimmered, 3, maybe 4 infected moving through the clearing ahead. They weren't shambling. These were fast. A newer strain. Too close to risk moving, Tobias whispered. Carmen reached into her satchel and pulled out a small disc. I made this from their own tech. Soundbait beacon. Not perfect, but it'll draw them. She threw it in an arc to the far right. It landed with a soft click, then let out a pulsing, rhythmic chirp, almost like a bird's mating call. The infected immediately turned, heads jerking unnaturally. Then, with startling speed, they rushed toward the sound and vanished into the trees. Go. Now, Carmen said. They ran. Through underbrush, past ruined watchtowers, and finally toward the northern ridge, where the last known relay station stood like a skeleton on the hillside. By the time they reached the tower, the storm had started to ease. The stars peeked through cracks in the clouds, and the air smelled of wet metal and pine. The tower still stood. A rusted frame of hope against the end of the world. Carmen climbed first, activating the portable transmitter she'd hidden in her pack. Mara helped brace the ladder while Tobias kept watch with his crossbow. At the top, Carmen connected the drive and began transmitting. Seconds passed. Then the console blinked. "Signal's bouncing," she said breathlessly. "I'm routing it through 3 old towers. One of them's still active. Message is going through. They'll know. They'll all know." Suddenly, from the forest below, movement. Not just infected. Lights. Multiple. Voices. Radios crackling. "They found us," Mara said, drawing her knife. Leora had dispatched a team. She wasn't about to let her secrets escape into the world. But Mara didn't flinch. She looked up at Carmen and shouted, "Send everything." "Already gone," Carmen replied. "Then we fight." The storm had passed. But the real battle was only beginning. The first shot cracked through the forest like lightning splitting a tree. Mara didn't hesitate. She yanked Carmen down from the tower just as a bullet shattered the railing where she'd been standing. The relay station, now their last hope and temporary fortress, was under siege. From the shadowed tree line, Leora's guards advanced, dressed in Haven's patchwork armor, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their orders weren't to capture. They were to contain. "They'll destroy the tower," Carmen panted, clutching the now empty transmitter. "They don't know it's already done." "They don't care," Tobias growled. "They're here to make sure we don't live to tell anyone in person." "Cover north and west," Mara ordered, motioning to the tree line. "Jace, check our rear. If they push from the south, we retreat downhill." "We'll be cornered," Jace warned. "Only if we stay still," Mara said. "And we've never been the stay-still type." Tobias ducked behind a rusted generator casing and loaded his crossbow. Carmen rechecked her tools, no weapons, just wires, flares, and one last sound bait disc. "This buys us 5 seconds at best," she said, holding it up. 5 seconds might be enough," Mara replied. The first of Leora's enforcers crept through the mud, their flashlights cutting beams through the branches. Their boots were silent, but not invisible. Mara watched their formation. Trained. Disciplined. Haven's guard wasn't made of survivors, they were made of believers. "Jace, now!" Mara yelled. Jace hurled a broken chunk of solar panel toward the left flank. It clanged against a stone wall, drawing attention. At the same moment, Carmen activated the sound bait and threw it in the opposite direction. The two noises clashed, unnatural, discordant, and the guards faltered, confused. Then from the east, a different sound rose. Snarling. Wet and close. The infected had found them too. 3 figures burst from the darkness, feral, gaunt, limbs jerking unnaturally. Haven's soldiers turned their attention, shooting wildly. "Run!" Mara shouted. The group broke from the ridge, sprinting downhill into the fog-covered slope. Bullets zipped through the trees. Screams followed, human and infected. Carmen stumbled, but Jace caught her arm. "Keep going." They reached the valley floor, lungs heaving, boots soaked. Mara stopped to check behind them. One infected was following, fast. Tobias spun and fired. The bolt sank deep into its chest. It fell, writhing, until it finally stopped twitching. They collapsed in a clearing just outside the ruins of an old bus depot, broken glass, overturned vehicles, and rusting bones. But for now, no pursuers. Only the pounding of their hearts and the scent of rain-soaked dirt. Carmen leaned back against a broken seat. "I sent everything. It's done. The Whisper Network's proof. The footage. The survivor logs. The broadcast reached Outpost 9. Maybe further." Mara knelt beside her, hands on her knees. "Then it's no longer just Haven's secret. Jace pulled out a small radio he'd taken from one of Haven's patrol packs. He tuned the dial, static hissing. Then, voices. Repeat, received partial transmission from Sector 7. Coordinates match pre-collapse relay beacons. Information includes internal logs from Haven, request verification. It was real. Carmen smiled faintly. We did it. But Mara didn't smile. She looked to the woods. They'll come after us. Not just Leora's guards. Others too. People who believe Haven is the last good thing left in this world. If we expose its rot, we challenge the idea that safety can exist without freedom. Tobias nodded. Truth always costs something. Mara rose to her feet. Then we pay the price. But not alone. She raised the radio. This is Mara Elston, formerly of Outpost 7. We've escaped Haven with data proving leadership corruption, forced disappearances, and suppression of dissent. We're requesting safe passage to any verified zone. We carry vital records and testimony. A pause. Then a voice crackled back. This is Outpost 9 Command. We hear you, Mara. Coordinates logged. Assistance en route. Do not engage. Hold position. Carmen blinked. They're sending help? They're sending belief, Mara said. And that's more dangerous to Leora than any bullet. Back inside Haven, Leora stood in the tower, drenched from the storm, watching her returning guards, bloodied, 2 wounded, 1 missing. The information was out. The truth had slipped her grasp. Kellen stood before her now, arms crossed. They made it. Leora didn't flinch. Then we rebuild. We prepare. There are still people who trust me. For now, Kellen said. But the world's listening again. Leora turned to the map behind her. Then we remind them why silence kept them safe. In the forest clearing, Mara and her team stood tall beneath a gray sky. The rain had stopped. But the storm was only just beginning. The transmission spread faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, 3 outposts replied. One confirmed the footage. Another offered sanctuary. The third sent something even more important, a plan. Outpost 9 had been waiting for confirmation about Haven for months. Whispers of disappearances. Survivors who had tried to reach it but never returned. Leora's regime had stayed hidden by cutting all outgoing communications, but now, with the relay station reactivated and the files Carmen transmitted, the mask had shattered. And so came the response: disarm Haven's control. Reclaim it from within. In a clearing beyond the collapsed bus depot, Mara and her team gathered around a stolen map of Haven. Red XS marked weak points, guard stations with blind spots, access tunnels under the old water line, abandoned rooftops that once held solar panels and now served as secret paths. They'll have doubled patrols since we escaped, Jace said. And they'll be hunting anyone who even looks like a sympathizer. Imani, who had rejoined them with 2 more Whisper Network members, nodded. They already are. But not everyone's afraid anymore. You lit the fire. Now it's spreading. Mara looked at the group, tired but fierce. This isn't about revenge. We're not here to burn Haven down. We're here to open it up, for everyone. Then we'll need to take the control center, Carmen said. It's where Leora controls the comms, power reroutes, and security. We cut that off, she can't silence us anymore. Tobias grunted. And if she won't surrender? Then the people decide what comes next, Mara replied. They approached Haven on the 3rd night, under the cover of mist and early dawn. Fog rolled in thick, and the air was heavy with the smell of damp leaves and smoldering ash. Perfect for a quiet infiltration. Imani led them through the West Pipe Gate, the same way they'd escaped. This time, they weren't running. They were taking the fight home. Inside, the tension was different. People whispered behind shuttered windows. Guards patrolled with tight grips on their weapons, their faces less certain than before. The once quiet streets now buzzed with unease. Mara and the others moved quickly, using maintenance tunnels and collapsed stairwells. By sunrise, they were positioned around Haven's central tower, the command spire. Inside, Leora sat calmly in her chair, flanked by 2 loyal guards. The rest of her team, she knew, had either deserted or secretly shifted loyalty. But she held her composure. "They'll come here first," she said. "Let them. We remind them why structure matters. Why order is safety." A siren sounded across the courtyard. Not a warning, but a signal. Mara and Tobias breached the north entry. Jace and Imani slipped through the east balcony. Carmen climbed to the generator core, where she plugged a device into the backup system. One by one, the monitors in the command room blinked off. Leora stood, fury flashing in her eyes. Who gave them access? Her own people looked at each other, uncertain. Mara's voice came from behind. "I did." She stepped into the room, flanked by Tobias, soaked from the climb but unshaken. Her hands weren't raised in surrender. They held no weapons. "You can try to lock down the gates. But the people already know," Mara said. Leora narrowed her eyes. "They don't understand what I've built here." "No," Mara replied. "They understand too well. They just don't want to be ruled by fear anymore." Outside, a crowd gathered, residents of Haven, Whisper Network members, former guards who'd seen enough. Carmen had rerouted the central speaker system. Every word was being broadcast. Leora stepped forward. "You think the world outside is better? That chaos is kinder than control?" "No," Mara said softly. "But lies disguised as safety are just another form of chaos." Jace walked to the front and held up the final proof, a printout from the incident logs, the footage of Dr. Rourke, the deleted names. He held it high so the people could see. "They can decide now," he said. Leora looked around the room and saw it, defeat. Not in guns or brute force, but in truth. In the hearts of people no longer afraid. She stepped back. Then, with a quiet sigh, she removed the command badge from her chest and placed it on the table. "You'd better know what you're doing," she said. Mara didn't respond. Because it wasn't about her. It was about all of them. By sunset, Haven had changed. The control tower was repurposed. The guard patrols were restructured, voluntary and cooperative. The Whisper Network stepped forward and began openly documenting every part of the transition. There were questions. Tensions. Not everyone agreed. But that was freedom. That was what they'd come for. Mara stood on the rooftop of the old schoolhouse, watching as the people of Haven gathered. For the first time, no one was being watched. No one was being silenced. And beyond the walls, other signals had begun to echo back. Hope was spreading. And nothing, not the infected, not silence, not fear, could stop it now. To be continued in Part 8, A New Dawn for the Dead Zone. Would you like me to continue with the final Part 8 now? The first sunrise over a free Haven felt different. Gone were the heavy iron patrols, the loudspeaker warnings, the shadow of a single voice controlling many. In their place came small sounds that once meant nothing, but now meant everything: hammers repairing shutters, children laughing in open streets, arguments that didn't lead to disappearances, and the crackle of radios that no longer had to hide. Mara stood at the eastern wall, watching light pour over the ruins beyond. Her rifle slung across her shoulder felt heavier than usual. Not from weight, but from memory. Beside her, Carmen adjusted the solar relay transmitter mounted on the rebuilt tower. Signals solid. Outpost 9 confirmed. Outposts 3 and 12 want to send delegates. Jace leaned against the railing, sipping from a steaming mug of wild root tea. So we're officially on the map now. We're more than that, said Tobias, stepping forward with a new bandage across his arm. We're proof. Proof that a community could rebuild not with fear, but with shared risk. Proof that the dead zone, once thought to be the end of everything, could become something else. Hope. Inside what used to be Leora's command room, now a shared planning hall, residents gathered around hand-drawn maps and scavenged laptops. No one gave orders. Everyone voted. Imani read off the latest from the Border Scouts, a small group of survivors approaching from the northern ridge. Not infected. Not armed. Just exhausted. They say they heard the signal, Imani told the room. They've been running for weeks. Lost their own safe house. They're asking for shelter. They'll get it, Kellen said without hesitation. We all did, once. A young woman raised her hand. What if they're not telling the truth? They might not be, Mara said. But fear isn't who we are anymore. Nobody argued. That, more than anything, showed how much had changed. Later that day, Mara met Leora in the garden behind the greenhouse. Stripped of her title and power, Leora now spent her time tending crops, voluntarily, but silently. You could have left, Mara said. Leora didn't look up. And go where? I built this place. Even if I broke it. You ruled it, Mara corrected. Others built it. For a moment, Leora didn't respond. Then she stood, brushing dirt from her hands. You think democracy will save you from the next crisis? From the infected? From betrayal? No, Mara said. But it'll save us from becoming like you. Leora smiled, faint but genuine. Then I hope you're right. She turned back to her work. Not defeated. Not dangerous. Just, small. That night, beneath stars clearer than they'd been in years, the new council hosted a gathering in the central square. Survivors from across the dead zone joined in, strangers who'd followed scattered signals, rumors, and hope. Imani lit the first torch. We were shadows, she said, voice echoing through the crowd. Now we are seen. Carmen stepped forward, holding a repurposed radio mic. We once called this place the world's deadliest zone. But now, we call it something else, the starting point. Cheers rose. Real ones. Not forced. Not monitored. Mara stepped up last. She didn't have a speech. Just truth. When we first heard Haven's signal, we thought we were chasing hope. What we found was a lie wrapped in survival. But we didn't give up. Not then. Not now. Because survival alone isn't enough. We choose something better. We choose each other. More cheers. Louder this time. Not everyone clapped, but everyone listened. That was enough. Days passed. Then a week. New systems took root. Trade networks opened. Information flowed freely. And while the infected still prowled the borders, they no longer defined the limits of what people could build. Outpost, 3 sent engineers to help repair Haven's failing turbines. Outpost, 9 delivered fresh soil and heirloom seeds. Even distant settlements long thought destroyed began responding. And through it all, Mara's team stayed. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Carmen taught classes on signal systems and encryption. Jace helped rebuild the old rail line into a trade route. Tobias took charge of organizing outer wall defenses, mentoring younger survivors who had never fought before. As for Mara, she walked the perimeter each morning, watching. Listening. Not for threats. For signs of growth. One afternoon, a young girl ran up to her with a scrap of paper. She handed it over and smiled. It was a drawing. Crude, but clear. A building with people inside. A light on the roof. A red thread shaped like an ear. Beneath it, written in shaky handwriting. This is what saved us. Mara smiled. You drew this? The girl nodded. My mom said you were the reason we're free now. No, Mara said gently, kneeling. You are. She looked up at the tower above, the one that had once been a tool of control and fear. Now it was a beacon. And its signal would never go silent again. End of Part 8, The End.